Shortly before his death, Mr. Reed adopted his orphaned niece, Jane Eyre. From the beginning she was a discord in Gateshead Hall, having nothing in common with her aunt or cousins. They were not bound to regard with sympathy a child who could not sympathize with them, and Jane was made the scapegoat of the nursery. It wasn't until the day she was pushed, screaming with fear, into the red room where her uncle had died, that Mrs. Reed was made aware of Jane's rebellious nature. The troublesome child had made herself ill and must be sent away to school. Mr. Brocklehurst, the headmaster and owner of Lowood School, appeared to Jane as a black pillar, his grim face at the top like a carved mask. Mrs. Reed, who occupied her usual place by the fireside, made a signal for Jane to approach.
Mr. Brocklehurst, this is the little girl respecting whom I applied to you.
She is very small, Mrs. Reed. What is her age?
10 years.
So much? She is very small. Your name, little girl?
Jane Eyre, sir.
Well, Jane Eyre, and are you a good child?
Perhaps the less said on that subject, the better, Mr. Brocklehurst.
Sorry indeed to hear it. She and I must have some talk. Come here. No sight so sad as that of a naughty child, especially a naughty little girl.
I should be glad if you requested the superintendent and teachers of Lowood School to keep a strict eye on her, and, above all, to guard against her worst fault, a tendency to deceit.
Your decisions are perfectly judicious, madam. Humility is a Christian grace, and one peculiarly appropriate to our pupils. Only the other day my daughter Augusta told her mamma how plain and quiet all the girls at Lowood look, with their hair combed behind their ears and their long petticoats. She said they looked almost like poor people's children. Jane shall be placed in that nursery of chosen plants, and I trust she will show herself grateful for the inestimable privilege.
After Mr. Brocklehurst's departure, Jane told her aunt how she hated her. She would tell everyone how she had been treated with miserable cruelty. Mrs. Reed looked frightened and murmured that Jane would indeed be sent away. It was at the latter end of January that Jane first saw the dreary grounds of her new imprisonment. She shuddered as she looked about her. Pale and thin girls herded together for shelter and warmth in the veranda, and as a dense mist penetrated to their shivering frames, she heard frequently the sound of a hollow cough. Jane hardly knew where she was. Gateshead and her past life seemed floated away to an immeasurable distance. As spring drew on, the hardships of Lowood lessened, although semi-starvation and neglected colds had predisposed most of the pupils to receive infection. Jane and the rest, who continued to be well, were allowed to ramble in the woods like gypsies. They lived better, too, as Mr. Brocklehurst had been driven away by fear of infection. Jane never tired of Helen Burns, who evinced for her a quiet and faithful friendship, which ill-humour never soured. But Helen fell sick, not as the others of typhus, but of consumption, which in Jane's ignorance she understood as something mild, which time and care would soon alleviate.
You came to bid me goodbye, then. You are just in time, probably. No. No, Helen. There is nothing to grieve about. We all must die one day, and my illness is not painful. My mind is at rest. I have faith that I am going to God. How comfortable I am. That last fit of coughing has tired me a little. I feel as if I could sleep. But don't leave me, Jane. I like to have you near me.
I'll stay with you, dear Helen.
After an investigation prompted by the advent of typhus, Mr. Brocklehurst was aided in the discharge of his duties by gentlemen of rather more enlarged and sympathizing minds, and the school thus improved became in time a truly useful and noble institute. When Miss Temple, her favourite teacher, left to be married, Jane remembered that the real world was wide, and that a varied field of hopes and fears awaited those who had the courage to go forth into its expanse, seeking real knowledge of life amidst its perils. Her vacations were still spent at school. Mrs. Reed had never sent for her. Neither she nor any of her family had ever been to visit her. Jane gasped for liberty, for change and stimulus. She decided to advertise.
J.E. is requested to send references, name and address, and all particulars to Mrs. Fairfax, Thornfield, near Millcote. An elderly lady's writing. Beautifully written. My own hand does not compare, but as what I write in my diary is for my eyes alone. Let me see. What is my last entry? After 8 years at Lowood, both as pupil and now for the past 2 years as teacher, it is time for me to take up a new servitude where my excellent education can be put to good use elsewhere. Miss Temple is married to her Reverend. Mrs. Reed, as my natural guardian, in her reply for her permission, has written that I may do as I please. A phase of my life is closing today, a new one opening tomorrow.
How do you do, my dear? I'm afraid you've had a tedious ride. John drives so slowly.
Mrs. Fairfax, I suppose?
Yes, you're right. Come to the fire and sit down. You must be cold. I'll see that your luggage is carried into your room.
Shall I have the pleasure of seeing Miss Fairfax tonight?
Miss Fairfax? Oh, you mean Miss Varon? Varon is the name of your future pupil. She is not my daughter. I have no family. I am so glad you are come. It will be quite pleasant living here now with a companion. To be sure, it is pleasant at any time, for Thornfield, though rather neglected of late, is a fine old hall. And this autumn, little Adele Varon and her nurse came. Her child makes the house come alive all at once. And now you are here, I shall be quite gay. But I'll not keep you sitting up late tonight. You must be tired. I'll take you to your room.
Mrs. Fairfax took her candle, and Jane followed her upstairs. A very chill and vault-like air pervaded the stairs and gallery. Jane was glad to find her own small chamber more cheerful. When she awoke, it was broad day. Jane dressed herself with her usual care. She was solicitous to be neat, and to please as much as her want of beauty would permit. She felt it was her misfortune to be so little and so pale. She traversed the long gallery to the hall and stepped into the garden. Thornfield Hall was of 3 stories high. Its battlements at the top gave it a picturesque look. Jane reflected what a great place it was for one lonely little dame like Mrs. Fairfax to inhabit.
What, out already? I see you are an early riser.
I already like Thornfield very much.
Yes, it is a pretty place, but I fear it will be getting out of order unless Mr. Rochester should take it into his head to come here and reside here permanently. Great houses and fine grounds require the presence of the proprietor.
Mr. Rochester? Who is he?
The owner of Thornfield. Did you not know that he was called Rochester?
I thought Thornfield belonged to you.
To me. Bless you, my child. What an idea. To me. I am only the housekeeper.
And the little girl, my pupil?
She is Mr. Rochester's ward. He commissioned me to find a governess for her. Here she comes with her bonne, as she calls her nurse.
Are they foreigners?
The nurse is a foreigner, and Adele was born on the continent. When she first came here, she could speak little English. Now she can speak it better, but she mixes it so with French. I don't understand her.
Jane's discovery that Mrs. Fairfax was only an affable and kind little widow, and not a great dame, but a dependent like herself, made her feel better pleased than ever, as the equality between them was real, and not the result of condescension on Mrs. Fairfax's part. As she was meditating on this, a little girl, followed by her attendant, came running up the lawn. Adele was perhaps 7 or 8 years old, slightly built, with a pale, small-featured face, and a redundancy of hair falling in curls to her waist. Jane took her into the library for her first lesson, where her pupil proved docile, but disinclined to apply herself to study. And at noon, Adele was allowed to return to her nurse.
Your morning school hours are over now, I suppose?
What a beautiful room.
Yes, this is the dining room. I have just opened the windows to let in a little air and sunshine. Although Mr. Rochester's visits are so rare, he likes to find the rooms in readiness.
Is Mr. Rochester an exacting, fastidious sort of man?
Not particularly so, but he has a gentleman's tastes and habits.
Do you like him? Is he generally liked?
I have no cause to do otherwise than to like him, and I believe he is considered a just and liberal landlord by his tenants. He is rather peculiar, perhaps. He has travelled a great deal. I dare say he is clever, but I never had much conversation with him.
In what way is he peculiar?
I don't know. You cannot always be sure if he is in jest or earnest, whether he is pleased or the contrary. But he is a good master. Come and see the rest of the house.
Do the servants sleep in these rooms?
No, they occupy a range of smaller apartments at the back. If there were a ghost at Thornfield Hall, this would be its haunt. Come and see the view from the leads.
Mrs. Fairfax? Did you hear that loud laugh? Who is it?
Grace? Too much noise, Grace. Remember directions.
Jane did not expect Grace to answer, for the laugh was as tragic, as preternatural a laugh as any she had ever heard. Had it not been high noon, she felt that she would have been superstitiously afraid. The door nearest her opened, and a servant came out, a woman of between 30 and 40. A set, square-made figure, red-haired, and with a hard, plain face. She curtsied silently and went in. Mrs. Fairfax told Jane that Grace was employed to sew and help Leah in her housemaid's work. October, November, December passed away. One late afternoon, Jane set out over the icy track to post a letter to Hay. As she sat on a stile to admire the rising moon, there was a rush as a great dog glided under the hedge, a lion-like creature with long hair and a huge head.
Are you injured, sir? Can I do anything?
You must stand on one side. Down, pilot, down.
If you are hurt and want help, sir, I can fetch someone, either from Thornfield Hall or from Hay.
Thank you. I shall do. I've no broken bones, only a sprain.
I cannot think of leaving you, sir, at so late an hour, in this solitary lane, until I see you fit enough to mount your horse.
I should think you ought to be at home yourself, if you have a home in this neighbourhood. Where do you come from?
From just below.
Oh.
And I am not at all afraid of being out late when it is moonlight.
Do you mean at Thornfield Hall?
Yes, sir.
Oh. Whose house is it?
Mr. Rochester's.
Do you know Mr. Rochester?
No, I have never seen him.
Oh, you're not a servant at the hall, of course. You are?
I am the governess.
The governess. Deuce take me if I had forgotten. The governess. I cannot commission you to fetch help, but you may help me a little yourself, if you will be so kind. You have not an umbrella that I may use as a stick?
No.
May I lean on you? Oh, excuse me, the necessity compels me to make you useful. Try to get hold of my horse's bridle. Now, just hand me the whip. Yeah, thank you. Now, make haste with the letter to Hay, and return as fast as you can.
Something of daylight still lingered, and the moon was waxing bright. Jane could see the man quite plainly. He had a dark face, with stern features and a heavy brow. His eyes and gathered eyebrows looked ireful and thwarted just now. He was past youth, but had not reached middle age. A touch of a spurred heel made his horse first start and rear, and then bound away. Jane took up her muff and walked on. The incident had marked with change one single hour of a monotonous life. Jane's help had been needed and claimed. The following day, Jane, summoned to join her employer for tea, changed into her black silk dress. Mr. Rochester was half inclined on a couch. The dog Pilot lay before the fire. Adele knelt near him. Jane knew her traveller with his broad and jutty eyebrows. She recognized his decisive nose, more remarkable, she thought, for its character than beauty. His mouth, chin, and jaw were very grim. His shape, now divested of cloak, harmonized with his physiognomy. It was a good figure, in the athletic sense of the term, broad-chested and thin-flanked, though neither tall nor graceful. He addressed no word to her until the tea-things had been removed, and Adele ordered to amuse herself with Pilot.
You have been resident in my house 3 months.
Yes, sir.
And you came from?
From Lowood School in Shire.
Ah, a charitable concern. How long were you there?
8 years.
8 years. You must be tenacious of life. I thought half the time in such a place would have done up any constitution. No wonder you have rather the look of another world. I marvelled where you had got that sort of face. When you came on me in Hay Lane last night, I thought unaccountably of fairy tales, and had half a mind to demand whether you had bewitched my horse. I'm not sure yet. Who are your parents?
I have none.
Nor ever had, I suppose. Do you remember them?
No.
I thought not. And so, you were waiting for your people when you sat on that stile.
For whom, sir?
For the men in green. It was a proper moonlight evening for them. Did I break through one of your rings that spread that damned ice on the causeway?
The men in green all forsook England 100 years ago. I don't think either summer or harvest or winter moon will ever shine on their revels more.
If you disown parents, you must have some sort of kinsfolk, uncles and aunts.
No, none that I ever saw.
And your home?
I have none.
Where do your brothers and sisters live?
I have no brothers or sisters.
Who recommended you to come here?
I advertised, and Mrs. Fairfax answered my advertisement.
Miss Eyre, have you ever lived in a town?
No, sir.
Have you seen much society?
None but the pupils and teachers of Lowood, and now the inmates of Thornfield.
Have you read much?
Only such books as came in my way, and they have not been numerous or very learned.
You've lived the life of a nun. No doubt you are well drilled in religious forms. Brocklehurst, who I understand directs Lowood, is a parson, is he not?
Yes, sir.
And you girls probably worshipped him as a convent full of religieuses would worship their director.
Oh, no.
Oh, you are very cool. No. What? A novice not worship her priest? Oh, that sounds blasphemous.
I disliked Mr. Brocklehurst, and I was not alone in the feeling. He is a harsh man, at once pompous and meddling. He cut off our hair, and for economy's sake, bought us bad needles and thread, with which we could hardly sew.
And was that the head and front of his offending?
He starved us when he had the sole superintendence of the provision department, before the committee was appointed. And he bored us with long lectures once a week, and with evening readings from books of his own inditing, about sudden deaths and judgments, which made us afraid to go to bed.
What age were you when you went to Lowood?
About 10.
And you stayed there 8 years. You are now then 18. Arithmetic, you see, is useful. Without its aid, I should hardly have been able to guess your age. It is a point difficult to fix where the features and countenance are so much at variance, as in your case. And now, what did you learn at Lowood? Can you play?
A little.
Of course. That is the established answer. Adele showed me some sketches this morning, which she said were yours. I don't know whether they were entirely of your doing. Probably a master aided you.
No, indeed.
Oh, well, show me your portfolio, if you can vouch for its contents being original. But don't pass your word unless you're certain. I can recognize patchwork.
Then I will say nothing, and you shall judge for yourself, sir.
And when did you find time to do them? They have taken much time, and some thought.
I did them in the last 2 vacations I spent at Lowood, when I had no other occupation.
Where did you get your copies?
Out of my head.
The head I see now on your shoulders?
Yes, sir.
Oh. Has it other furniture of the same kind within?
I should think it may have. I should hope better.
Oh, were you happy when you painted these pictures?
To paint them, in short, was to enjoy one of the keenest pleasures I have ever known.
Well, that is not saying much. Your pleasures, by your own account, have been few. But I dare say you did exist in a kind of artist's dreamland while you blent and arranged these strange tints. Did you sit at them long each day?
I had nothing else to do, because it was the vacation, and I sat at them from morning till noon, and from noon till night. The length of the midsummer days favoured my inclination to apply.
Oh, and you felt self-satisfied with the result of your ardent labour?
Far from it. I was tormented by the contrast between my idea and my handiwork.
Oh.
In each case I had imagined something which I was quite powerless to realise.
Not quite. You have secured the shadow of your thought, but not properly. You have not enough of the artist's skill to give it full being, yet the drawings are, for a schoolgirl, peculiar. These eyes in your picture of the evening star you must have seen in a dream. How could you make them look so clear, and yet not at all brilliant? For the planet above them quells their rays. And what meaning is that in their solemn depths? And who taught you to paint wind? Well, there. Put the drawings away. It is 9 o'clock. What are you about, Miss Eyre, to let Adele sit up so long?
Adele went to kiss him before quitting the room. Mr. Rochester endured the caress, but scarcely seemed to relish it more than Pilot would have done. He made a movement of the hand towards the door, in token that he was tired of the company, and wished to dismiss them. Jane took her portfolio, curtsied to him, received a frigid bow in return, and so withdrew. Jane saw very little of Mr. Rochester for several days. Then one evening he again sent for her. Mr. Rochester, in his after-dinner mood, looked much less gloomy and more self-indulgent than the frigid temper of the morning. His change of mood did not offend her, because she saw that she had nothing to do with their alternation. Still he looked preciously grim, cushioning his massive head against the swelling back of his chair, and receiving the light of the fire on his granite-hewn features and in his great dark eyes.
You examine me, Miss Eyre. Do you find me handsome? You're silent. Criticize me. Does my forehead please you? You look very puzzled, Miss Eyre. And though you are not pretty any more than I am handsome, yet a puzzled air becomes you. Besides, it is convenient, for it keeps those searching eyes of yours away from my physiognomy, and busies them with the worsted flowers on the rug. So puzzle on.
I am disposed to be gregarious and communicative tonight, and that is why I sent for you. The fire and the chandelier were not sufficient company for me, nor would Pilot have been, for none of these can talk. Adele is a degree better, but still far below the mark. Mrs. Fairfax, ditto. You, I am persuaded, can suit me if you will. You puzzled me the first evening I invited you down here. I've almost forgotten you since. Other ideas have driven yours from my head. But tonight I am resolved to be at ease, to dismiss what importunes and recall what pleases. It would please me now to draw you out, to learn more of you. Therefore, speak. You are dumb, Miss Eyre. Stubborn. And annoyed. Oh, it is consistent. I put my request in an absurd, almost insolent form. Miss Eyre, I beg your pardon. The fact is, once for all, I don't wish to treat you like an inferior. Well, that is, I claim only such superiority as must result from 20 years' difference in age and a century's advance in experience. This is legitimate and j'y tiens, as Adele would say. And it is by virtue of this superiority and this alone that I desire you to have the goodness to talk to me a little now and divert my thoughts, which are galled with dwelling on one point, cankering as a rusty nail.
I am willing to amuse you, if I can, sir, quite willing. But I cannot introduce a topic, because how do I know what will interest you? Ask me questions, and I will do my best to answer them.
Then, in the first place, do you agree with me that I have a right to be a little masterful, abrupt, perhaps exacting, sometimes, on the grounds I stated, namely that I am old enough to be your father, and that I have battled through a varied experience with many men of many nations, and roamed over half the globe, while you have lived quietly with one set of people in one house?
Do as you please, sir.
Oh, that is no answer. Or rather, it is a very irritating, because a very evasive one. Reply clearly.
I don't think, sir, you have a right to command me merely because you are older than I, or because you have seen more of the world than I have. Your claim to superiority depends on the use you have made of your time and experience.
Promptly spoken, yes. But I won't allow that, seeing that it would never suit my case, as I have made an indifferent, not to say a bad, use of both advantages. Well, leaving superiority out of the question, then, you must still agree to receive my orders now and then without being piqued or hurt by the tone of command. Will you?
I was thinking, sir, that very few masters would trouble themselves to inquire whether or not their paid subordinates were piqued and hurt by their orders.
Paid subordinates? What, you are my paid subordinate, are you? Oh, yes. Oh, I'd forgotten the salary. Oh, well, then. On that mercenary ground, will you agree to let me hector you a little?
No, sir, not on that ground. But on the ground that you did forget it, and that you care whether or not a dependent is comfortable in his dependency. I agree heartily.
And will you consent to dispense with a great many conventional forms and phrases without thinking that the omission arises from insolence?
I am sure, sir. I should never mistake informality for insolence. One I rather like, the other nothing free-born would submit to, even for a salary.
Bah! Most things free-born will submit to anything for a salary. Therefore, keep to yourself and don't venture on generalities of which you are intensely ignorant. However, I mentally shake hands with you for your answer despite its inaccuracy, and as much for the manner in which it was said, and for the substance of the speech. The manner was frank and sincere. One does not often see such a manner. No, on the contrary, affectation or coldness or stupid, coarse-minded misapprehension of one's meaning are the usual rewards of candour. Not 3 in 3,000 raw school governesses would have answered me as you have just done. But I don't mean to flatter you. If you are cast in a different mould to the majority, it is no merit of yours. Nature did it. And then, after all, I go too fast in my conclusions, for what I yet know, you maybe know better than the rest. You may have intolerable defects to counterbalance your few good points. Yes, you are right. I have plenty of faults of my own. I know it, and I don't wish to palliate them, I assure you.
I started on the right course, but at the age of 21 ill fortune thrust me on the wrong tack. Nature meant me to be, on the whole, a good man, Miss Eyre. And you see I'm not so. Yet I'm not a villain.
Dread remorse when you are tempted to err, Miss Eyre. Remorse is the poison of life.
Repentance is said to be its cure, sir.
It is not its cure. Reformation may be its cure, and I could reform. I have strength yet for that. If... but where is the use of thinking of it? Hampered, burdened, cursed as I am. Besides, since happiness is irrevocably denied me, I have a right to get pleasure out of life, and I will get it, cost what it may.
Then you will degenerate still more, sir.
Oh, possibly. Yet why should I, if I can still get sweet, fresh pleasure? And I may get it as sweet and fresh as the wild honey the bee gathers on the moor.
It will sting. It will taste bitter, sir.
How do you know? You've never tried it.
To speak the truth, sir, I don't understand you at all. I cannot keep up the conversation because it has got out of my depth.
Oh.
Only one thing I know. You said you were not as good as you should like to be, and that you regretted your own imperfection. One thing I can comprehend. You intimated that to have a sullied memory was a perpetual bane. It seems to me that if you tried hard, you would in time find it possible to become what you yourself would approve, and that if from this day you began with resolution to correct your thoughts and actions, you would in a few years have laid up a new and stainless store of recollections, to which you might revert with pleasure.
Justly thought, rightly said, Miss Eyre. And at this moment I am paving hell with energy.
Sir?
I am laying down good intentions, which I believe durable as flint. Certainly my associates and pursuits shall be other than they have been.
Do you never laugh, Miss Eyre? Oh, don't trouble yourself to answer. I see you laugh rarely. But you can laugh very merrily, believe me. You are not naturally austere any more than I am naturally vicious. The Lowood constraint still clings to you somewhat, controlling your features, muffling your voice. And you fear in the presence of a man and a brother, or father, or master, or what you will, to smile too gaily, speak too freely. But in time, I think you will learn to be natural with me, as I find it impossible to be conventional with you. Where are you going?
It has struck 9, sir.
Never mind. Wait a minute. Adele is not ready to go to bed yet. While talking to you, I have occasionally watched Adele. She pulled out of her box about 10 minutes ago a little pink silk frock. Rapture lit her face as she unfolded it. Coquetry runs in her blood, blends with her brains, and seasons the marrow of her bones. In a few minutes she will re-enter, having put on her new robe, and I know what I shall see. A miniature of Céline Varens, as she used to appear on the boards at the Rising. But never mind that. I have been green too, Miss Eyre, aye, grass green. Not a more vernal tint freshens you now than once freshened me. My spring is gone, however, but it has left me that French floweret on my hands, which in some moods I would be fain rid of. I once cherished towards Céline Varens a grande passion. This passion she professed to return with ardour. Ugly as I am, I thought myself her idol. And, Miss Eyre, so much was I flattered by her preference for a British over a Gallic sylph that I installed her in a hotel, gave her a complete establishment of servants, a carriage, cashmeres, diamonds, etc. In short, I began the process of ruining myself in the received style like any other spoonie. I had, as I deserved to have, the fate of all other spoonies. I happened to call one evening unexpectedly, and I saw my charmer on the arm of a cavalier. I had walked in on them. I liberated Céline from my protection, but unluckily the Varens, 6 months before, had given me this fillette Adele. I'm not her father, but hearing she was quite destitute, I e'en took the poor thing out of the slime and mud of Paris and transplanted it here to grow up clean in the wholesome soil of an English country garden. Well, now that you know that it is the illegitimate offspring of a French opera girl, perhaps you will think differently of your post and protégé. You will be coming to me some day with notice that you have found another place, that you beg me to look out for a new governess, etc.
Adele is not answerable for either her mother's faults or yours. I have a regard for her, and that I know she is in a sense parentless, forsaken by her mother and disowned by you, sir. I shall cling to her more closely than before. How could I possibly prefer the spoilt pet of a wealthy family who would hate her governess to a lonely little orphan who leans towards her as a friend?
Oh, that is the light in which you view it. Well, I must go up now. And you too.
Now Mr. Rochester always has a word and a smile for me. I feel at times that he is more of a relation than my master. This makes me so happy and gratified. I do not find him ugly. Gratitude has made his face the object I best like to see, though he is proud, sardonic, and unaccountably moody, as though through some cruel cross of fate. I grieve for his grief, and wish I could assuage it. What alienates him from the house? Mrs. Fairfax said he stayed here seldom longer than a fortnight, but he has now been resident for 8 weeks. Ah, how joyless the days will seem without his presence. Who is there? Could it be Pilot? Who's there? Could it be Grace Poole? And is she possessed by the devil? I must go to Mrs. Fairfax. Oh, there is smoke coming from Mr. Rochester's room. Wake! Wake!
Is there a flood?
No, sir, but there has been a fire. Get up. Do you are quenched now.
What in the name of all the elves of Christendom is that Jane Eyre? Oh, what have you done to me? Witch, sorceress. Who is in the room beside you? Have you plotted to drown me?
In heaven's name, get up, sir. Somebody has plotted something. You cannot too soon find out who and what it is.
But there, I'm up now. Wait 2 minutes till I get into some dry garments. Now, what is it? I mean, who did it?
I had just finished writing my journal, sir, when I heard a strange laugh in the gallery. Then I spotted Flyer. I was on my way to find Mrs. Fairfax, but fortunately your door was ajar and I deluged you with all the water I could lay hands on. You were in deep sleep, no doubt stupefied by the smoke. Shall I call Mrs. Fairfax?
Oh, no, let her sleep unmolested. Just be still. You have a shawl on? If you are not warm enough, you may take my cloak. Wrap it round you and sit down in the armchair. There. I will put it on. Now, place your feet on the stool to keep them out of the wet. Yes. Now, I'm going to leave you for a few minutes. I shall take the candle. Remain where you are until I return. Be as still as a mouse. I must pay a visit to the second story. Don't move, remember, or call anyone. You say that you heard a strange laugh. You have heard that laugh before, I should think. Or something like it.
Yes, sir. There's a woman who sews here, called Grace Poole. She laughs in that way. She is a singular person.
Just so. Yes, Grace Poole, you have guessed it. She is, as you say, singular. Very. Well, I shall reflect on the subject. You are no talking fool. Say nothing about it. And now, return to your own room. I shall do very well on the sofa in the library for the rest of the night.
Good night, then, sir.
What? Are you quitting me already? And in that way?
You said I might go, sir.
Well, but not without taking leave, not without a word or two of acknowledgement and goodwill, not, in short, in that brief, dry fashion. Why, you have saved my life, snatched me from a horrible and excruciating death, and you walk past me as if we were mutual strangers. Well, at least shake hands. I have a pleasure in owing you so immense a debt. I cannot say more. I knew you would do me good in some way, at some time. I saw it in your eyes when I first beheld you. Their expression and smile did not strike delight in my very inmost heart for nothing. People talk of natural sympathies. I've heard of good genii. There are grains of truth in the wildest fable. My cherished preserver. Good night. Will you go?
I am cold, sir.
Cold, yes. Oh, and standing in a pool. Yes. Go, then, Jane. Go.
You have my hand, sir. I think I hear Mrs. Fairfax move, sir.
Oh. Well, leave me.
Mr. Rochester relaxed his fingers, and Jane was gone. She lay down, but never thought of sleep. Till morning dawned, she was tossed on an unquiet sea, where billows of trouble rolled under surges of joy. She both wished and feared to see Mr. Rochester. She wanted to hear his voice again, yet feared to meet his eye. At every moment of the new day, she expected his coming, but the morning was only disturbed by voices exclaiming over the fire, and sounds of scrubbing and setting to rights.
Good morning. Is that you, Grace Poole?
Good morning, miss.
Good morning, Grace. I see that you are repairing the curtains. Has anything happened here? I thought I heard the servants all talking together a while ago.
Only Master been reading in his bed last night. He fell asleep with his candle lit and the curtain got on fire. Fortunately, he awoke before the bedclothes or the woodwork caught and contrived to quench the flame with the water in the ewer.
Strange affair. Did Mr. Rochester wake nobody? Did no one hear him move?
Well, the servants sleep so far off, you know, miss. They'd not be likely to hear. Mrs. Fairfax's room and yours are the nearest to the master's, but Mrs. Fairfax doesn't hear well. She said she heard nothing. When people get elderly, they often sleep heavy. But you're young, miss. Perhaps you heard a noise.
I did, and at first I thought it was Pilot. And I am certain I heard a laugh, and a strange one.
Oh, it's hardly likely the master would laugh. You must have been dreaming.
I was not dreaming.
Have you told the master that you heard a laugh?
I have not had the opportunity of speaking to him this morning.
Oh, you didn't think of opening your door and looking out into the gallery?
On the contrary, I bolted my door.
It would be wise to do so.
It appeared to Jane that if Grace Poole discovered that her guilt was known or suspected, then she would be playing some of her malignant pranks on her. So she made it clear that her door would be secured in the future. Jane was dumbfounded at Grace's miraculous self-possession and inscrutable hypocrisy. It even entered her head that if Grace had been young and handsome, tenderer feelings than prudence or fear might have influenced Mr. Rochester on her behalf. She hastened to drive from her mind such a hateful notion, though she wanted to ask Mr. Rochester about Grace Poole. It little mattered whether her curiosity irritated him. She knew the pleasure of vexing and soothing him by turns. But still he did not come.
You ate so little at dinner. I hope you want your tea. I'm afraid you're not well today. You look flushed and feverish. Mr. Rochester at least has had a good day for his journey.
Journey? Is Mr. Rochester gone anywhere? I did not know that he was out.
Oh, he set off the moment he had breakfasted. He is gone to the Lees, Mr. Eshton's place, 10 miles on the other side of Millcote. I should think he is likely to stay a week or more. When fine, fashionable people get together, they are in no hurry to separate. Gentlemen, especially, are often in request at gatherings. And Mr. Rochester is so talented and so lively in society that I believe he is a general favourite. The ladies are very fond of him, though you would not think his appearance calculated to recommend him, particularly to their eyes.
Are there ladies at the Lees?
There are Mrs. Eshton and her 3 daughters. very elegant ladies indeed, and there are the Honourable Blanche and Mary Ingram, most beautiful women, I suppose. Miss Ingram is certainly the belle. Tall, fine bust, sloping shoulders, long, graceful neck, olive complexion, dark and clear, noble features. Eyes rather like Mr. Rochester's, large and black, and as brilliant as her jewels.
And this beautiful, accomplished lady is not yet married?
It appears not.
But I wonder no wealthy nobleman has taken a fancy to her. Mr. Rochester, for instance.
There is a considerable difference in age. Mr. Rochester is near 40. She is but 25. But you eat nothing.
No, I'm too thirsty to eat. Will you let me have another cup of tea? A greater fool than Jane Eyre has never breathed the breath of life. You, a favourite with Mr. Rochester. You, gifted with the power of pleasing him. You, of importance to him. Your folly sickens me. And you have derived pleasure from occasional tokens of preference. Equivocal tokens. Shown by a gentleman, a family, and a man of the world, to a dependent and a novice. How dared you? Poor stupid dupe. He said something in praise of your eyes, did he? Blind puppy. Open their bleared lids and look on your own accursed senselessness. It does good to no woman to be flattered by her superior, who cannot possibly intend to marry her. And it is madness in all women to let a secret love kindle within them, which, if unreturned, must devour the life that feeds it. This is your sentence, Jane Eyre. Tomorrow, place the glass before you, and draw in chalk your own portrait. Write under it, portrait of a governess. Disconnected, poor and plain. Then delineate the loveliest face you can imagine, as described by Mrs. Fairfax, of Blanche Ingram. Call it Blanche, an accomplished lady of rank. Whenever in future you should chance to fancy Mr. Rochester thinks well of you, take out these two pictures and compare them. Say, Mr. Rochester might probably win that noble lady's love, if he chose to strive for it. Is it likely that he would waste a serious thought on this indigent and insignificant plebeian? I shall do it in the morning.
Mr. Rochester, I thought you were not fond of children.
Nor am I, Miss Ingram.
Then what induced you to pick her up?
I did not pick her up. She was left on my hands.
You should have sent her to school. I suppose you have a governess for her? I saw her person with her just now. Is she gone? Oh, no. There she is, still behind the window curtain. You should hear Mamma on the chapter of governesses. Mary and I have had at least a dozen in our day. Half of them detestable and the rest ridiculous, and all incubi. Were they not, Mamma?
Did you speak, my own?
Our governesses were either detestable or ridiculous, were they not?
Oh, my dearest, don't mention governesses. The word makes me nervous. I have suffered a martyrdom from their incompetency and caprice. I thank heaven that I have now done with them. I noticed the little Adele's. I am a judge of physiognomy, and in her I see all the faults of her class.
What are they, madam?
You ask Blanche. She is nearer to you than I.
Oh, don't refer him to me, Mamma. I have but one word to say of the whole tribe. They are a nuisance. We used to play such tricks on them. But I move for the introduction of a new topic, Mr. Rochester. Do you second my motion?
Madam, I support you on this point, as on every other. Are you leaving, Miss Eyre? Why did you not come and speak to me?
I did not wish to disturb you, as you seemed engaged, sir.
What have you been doing during my absence?
Nothing particular. Teaching Adele as usual.
Oh, and getting a good deal paler than you were, as I saw at first sight. What is the matter?
Nothing at all, sir.
Did you take any cold that night you half drowned me?
Not the least.
You are deserting too early.
I am tired, sir.
And a little depressed. What about? Tell me.
Nothing. Nothing, sir, and I am not depressed.
But I affirm that you are. So much depressed that a few more words would bring tears to your eyes. Indeed, they are now shining and swimming. Oh, well, tonight I excuse you, though I would know what all this means. I shall expect you to appear in the drawing-room as long as my visitors stay. It is my wish. Don't neglect it. Now, go and send Sophie for Adele. Good night.
I cannot unlove Mr. Rochester. I am sure he means to marry Miss Ingram. She has in her a proud security in his intentions respecting her, and I have witnessed hourly in him a style of courtship which, though careless, is nevertheless captivating, and in its very pride irresistible. I do not write that I am jealous. Miss Ingram is very showy, but she is not genuine. Mr. Rochester is clearly conscious of his fair one's defects. There is an obvious absence of passion in his sentiments towards her. He is going to marry her because of family, because her rank and connections suit him. He has not given her his love. She cannot charm him. Surely she does not truly love him, for she does not study how to please him. If I were a gentleman like him, I would only marry a wife I could love. He is away on business at Millcote today. The ladies are playing cards. Some of the gentlemen have taken a walk up to the gypsy camp, whilst some are playing billiards in the billiard room.
It was verging on dusk when little Adele called out that Mr. Rochester was returning, but the post-chaise's passenger was a stranger, a tall, fashionable-looking man. Jane thought that his accent was unusual. Although at first sight he was a fine-looking man, on closer examination Jane detected something in his face which displeased her. His features were regular, but too relaxed. His eyes, though large and well-cut, wandered, and the life looking out of them was a tame and vacant one. The contrast between him and Mr. Rochester was like that between a meek sheep and the rough-coated, keen-eyed dog its guardian. He seemed a curious friend for her master.
It appears that I come at an inopportune time, madam, when my friend Mr. Rochester is from home, but I arrive from a long journey, and I think I may presume so far on an old and intimate acquaintance as to install myself here till he returns.
Have you come from abroad, sir?
Yes, from the West Indies. It was in Jamaica that I first met Mr. Rochester, but he disliked our climate with its burning heats. I always shiver in this English weather. May I draw near the fire?
Mr. Ashton, sir, there's an old woman outside. She's being quite troublesome.
No, well, tell her she'll be put in the stocks if she does not take herself off.
No, stop. Don't send her away, Ashton. We might turn the thing to account. Ladies, one of the gypsies, Sam tells us, is in the servants' hall at the moment and insists on being brought in before the quality to tell fortunes. Would you like to see her?
Surely, Colonel, you would not encourage such a low impostor.
Sam says she looks a real sorceress.
Mamma, I have a curiosity to have my fortune told.
My darling Blanche, recollect.
Show her into the library. I mean to have her all to myself.
I think I had better just look in upon her before any of the ladies go.
Thank you, Colonel. I shall go first.
If you please, Miss Eyre, the gypsy declares that there's another young lady in the room who has not been this year yet, and she swears she will not go till she's seen all. I thought it must be you. There's no one else for it. What'd you like, Terror?
Oh, I shall go by all means.
If you like, miss. I'll wait in the hall for you, and if she frightens you, just call and I'll come in.
No, Sam, return to the kitchen. I'm not in the least afraid.
And you want your fortune told?
I don't care about it, Mother. But I ought to warn you, I have no faith.
Show me your palm. Yet destiny is not written there. It is in the face, on the forehead, about the eyes, in the eyes themselves, in the lines of the mouth. The flame flickers in the eye shines like dew. It looks soft and full of feeling.
Do you not know me, Jane?
Now that I hear your own voice and see you clearly. Sir, what a strange idea.
Ah, but well carried out, don't you think?
The ladies were deceived.
No, stay a moment. Tell me what the people in the drawing room yonder are doing.
Discussing the gypsy, I dare say.
Sit down. Sit down. Let me hear what they said about me.
I had better not stay long, sir. It must be near 11 o'clock. Oh, are you aware, Mr. Rochester, that a stranger has arrived here since you left this morning?
A stranger? No. Who could it be? I expected no one. Is he gone?
No. He said he had known you long, and that he could take the liberty of installing himself here till you returned.
The devil he did. Did he give his name?
His name is Mason, sir. And he comes from the West Indies? From Spanish Town in Jamaica, I think.
Mr. Rochester was standing near Jane. He had taken her hand as if to lead her to a chair. As she spoke, he gave her arm a convulsive grip. The smile on his lips froze. Apparently a spasm caught his breath. He reiterated, Mason, the West Indies, 3 times, growing in the intervals of speaking whiter than ashes. He hardly seemed to know what he was doing. He sat down heavily, held Jane's hand, all the while chafing it and gazing on her with a most troubled and dreary look.
Can I help you, sir?
Oh, Jane, if aid is wanted, I'll seek it at your hands. I promise you that.
Thank you, sir.
What are the others doing, Jane?
Laughing and talking, sir.
They don't seem grave and mysterious, as if they had heard something strange.
Not at all. They are full of jests and gaiety.
And Mason?
He was laughing too.
If all these people came in a body and spat at me, what would you do, Jane?
Turn them out of the room, sir, if I could.
But if I were to go to them, and they only looked at me coldly and whispered sneeringly amongst each other, and then dropped off and left me one by one, what then? Would you go with them?
I rather think not, sir. I should have more pleasure in staying with you.
To comfort me?
Yes, sir, to comfort you, as well as I could.
And if they laid you under a ban for adhering to me?
I probably should know nothing about their ban, and if I did, I should care nothing about it.
Then you could dare censure for my sake?
I could dare it for the sake of any friend who deserved my adherence, as you, I am sure, do.
Go back now into the room. Step quietly up to Mason, and whisper in his ear that Mr. Rochester is come and wishes to see him. Show him in here, and then leave me.
Jane did her master's behest, sought out Mr. Mason, delivered the message, then went upstairs. At a late hour, after she had been in bed some time, she heard the visitors repair to their chambers, and Mr. Rochester wishing Mr. Mason good night. He spoke so cheerfully that her heart was eased, and she was soon asleep. She was awakened at dead of night by the moon, shining bright and full into her room. She had forgotten to draw her curtain as she usually did, and also to let down her window blind. She half rose and stretched her arm to draw the curtain. Good God, what a cry! The night, its silence, its rest, was rent in twain by a savage, a sharp, a shrilly sound that ran from end to end of Thornfield Hall. It came out of the third story, and above Jane's chamber she now heard a struggle. Doors opened as guests left their rooms.
Come! Rochester, Rochester, for God's sake, come!
Where the devil is Rochester? I cannot find him in his bed.
Here, be composed, all of you, I'm coming.
What awful event has taken place? Speak, let us know the worst of it.
Oh, all's right. Don't pull me down or strangle me, ladies. All's right. It's a mere rehearsal of much ado about nothing. One of the servants has had a nightmare, that's all. She is an excitable, nervous person. She dreamt she had seen an apparition and has taken a fit for fright. Now then, I must see you all back to your rooms, for until the house is settled, she cannot be looked after. Gentlemen, have the goodness to set the ladies an example. Miss Ingram, I'm sure you will not fail in evincing superiority to idle terrors. Amy and Louise, return to your nests like a pair of doves, as you are. Mesdames, you will take cold if you stay in this chill gallery any longer.
Jane returned with the others to her room, but not to go to bed. On the contrary, she dressed herself, for she was sure that Mr. Rochester's explanation had been given only to pacify his guests. It seemed to her that some event must follow the strange cry. She was ready for any emergency. There came a knock at her door. Mr. Rochester stood in the gallery holding a candle. Jane was to fetch a sponge, some sal volatile, and follow him to the fateful third story. There was a light shining from an open door which had been concealed behind a tapestry, from whence came a snarling sound. Grace Poole's laughter greeted Mr. Rochester as he went forward to the inner apartment. Jane saw Mr. Mason. He was still, his head leant back, his eyes were closed. She saw, too, that his linen on one side and one arm was almost soaked in blood. Mr. Rochester came out of the inner room and closed the door. He took the sponge and moistened the corpse-like face. Mr. Mason shortly opened his eyes and groaned.
Is there immediate danger?
No. Mere scratch. Don't be so overcome, man. Bear up.
She's done for me, I fear.
This wound was not done with a knife. There have been teeth here.
She bit me. Oh, it was frightful. She looked so quiet at first. She sucked the blood. She said she'd drain my heart.
We shall get you off cannily, Dick, and it'll be better, both for your sake and for that of the poor creature in yonder. Jane, trip on before us to the back stairs. Go down and tell the postilion that we are coming.
It was by this time 5:30. The gentleman now appeared. Before climbing into the carriage, Mr. Mason burst into tears, urging Mr. Rochester to take good care of his charge. Then the vehicle drove away. Mr. Rochester moved with slow step and abstracted air towards the door in the wall, bordering the orchard. He beckoned Jane to follow him into the garden, where the sun shone down the quiet walks.
Jane, will you have a flower?
Thank you, sir.
You have passed a strange night, and it has made you look pale. Were you afraid when I left you with Mason alone?
I was afraid of someone coming out of the inner room.
But I'd fastened the door. I had the key in my pocket. I should have been a careless shepherd if I had left a lamb, my pet lamb, so near a wolf's den unguarded. You were safe.
Will Grace Poole live here still, sir?
Oh, yes. Don't trouble your head about her.
But it seems to me that your life is hardly secure while she stays.
Oh, never fear. I can take care of myself. Though Mr. Mason might in a moment, by one careless word, deprive me not of life, yet forever of happiness. And I must keep him ignorant that harm to me is possible. Oh, now you look puzzled. And I will puzzle you further. You are my little friend, are you not?
I like to serve you, and obey you in all that is right.
Indeed, but if I bade you do what you thought was wrong, my friend would turn to me quiet and pale, saying, "No, sir, that is impossible. I cannot do it, because it is wrong." Let me put a case to you. Suppose you were no longer a girl, well-reared and disciplined, but a wild boy, indulged from childhood upwards. Suppose you were in a remote foreign land, where you committed a capital error, not a crime, from which you could not escape. You return home, heart-weary and soul withered. You make a new acquaintance, finding in this stranger much of the good and bright qualities which you have sought for 20 years. You desire to recommence your life, and to spend what remains to you of days in a way more worthy of an immortal being. To attain this end, are you justified in overleaping an obstacle of custom, a mere conventional impediment which neither your conscience sanctifies nor your judgment approves? I have been a worldly, restless man, and I believe I have found the instrument for my cure in... Little friend, you have noticed my penchant for Miss Ingram. Don't you think if I married her she would regenerate me with a vengeance? Oh, Jane, you are quite pale with your vigils. Don't you curse me for disturbing your rest?
Curse you? No, sir.
Shake my hand on it. What cold fingers. Jane, will you watch with me again? For instance, the night before I'm married. I'm sure I will not be able to sleep. To you I can talk of my lovely one, for now you have seen her and know her. She's a rare one, is she not, Jane? Well, Jane.
If you please, sir, I want leave of absence for a week or two to see a sick lady who has sent for me, my aunt, Mrs. Reed.
Reed of Gateshead, the magistrate?
It is his widow, sir.
Oh, well, you always said before you had no relatives.
None that would own me, sir. Oh. Mr. Reed is dead, and his wife cast me off.
Why?
Because I was poor and burdensome, and she disliked me.
Oh, but you have cousins. Mr. Lynn was talking of a Reed of Gateshead only yesterday. He said that he was the veriest rascal on town. There is a Miss Georgiana Reed of the same place, who was much admired for her beauty a season or two ago in London.
Mr. John Reed is dead too, sir. He ruined himself, and half ruined his family, and is supposed to have committed suicide.
Oh.
The news so shocked his mother that she suffered an apoplectic attack.
And what good can you do her, Jane? Besides, you say that she cast you off.
Yes, but that is long ago.
Oh.
And when her circumstances were very different. I could not be easy to neglect her wishes now.
How long will you stay?
As short a time as possible, sir.
Promise me only to stay a week.
I had better not promise. I might be obliged to break it.
At all events, you will come back. You will not be induced under any pretext to take up a permanent residence with her.
Oh, no. I shall certainly return if all be well.
And And who goes with you? You don't travel 100 miles alone.
No, sir. She has sent her coachman.
A person to be trusted?
Yes, sir. He has lived 10 years in the family.
When do you wish to go?
Early tomorrow morning, sir.
Well, you must have some money. I have given you no salary yet. Here.
You only owe me £15, sir, and you've given me 50. I have no change.
I don't want change. You know that. Yet, better not give you all. Now, you would perhaps stay away for 3 months if you had £50. There is 10.
Mr. Rochester, I may as well mention another matter of business to you whilst I have the opportunity. You have as good as informed me that you are going shortly to be married.
Yes, and what then?
In that case, sir, Adele ought to go to school. I am sure you will perceive the necessity of it.
To get her out of my bride's way, who might otherwise walk over her rather too emphatically. Well, there's some sense in the advice, no doubt of it. Adele, as you say, must go to school, and you, of course, must march straight to the devil.
I hope not, sir. But I must seek another situation somewhere.
Promise me one thing. Not to advertise and to trust this quest of a situation to me. I'll find you one in time.
I shall be glad to do so, sir. If you, in your turn, will promise that I and Adele shall be both safe out of the house before your bride enters it.
Very well, very well. I'll pledge my word on it. You go tomorrow, then?
Yes, sir. Early.
Shall you come to the drawing-room after dinner?
No, sir. I must prepare for the journey.
Oh, then, you and I must bid goodbye for a little while.
Farewell, sir.
Farewell, Miss Eyre? Is that all?
Yes. As much goodwill may be conveyed in one word as in many.
It seems dry and unfriendly. If one shook hands, for instance... but no. That would not content me either.
Jane wondered how long Mr. Rochester was going to stand with his back against the door. Then a bell rang, and away her master bolted without another syllable. She saw him no more during the day, and was off before he had risen in the morning. She reached the lodge at Gateshead at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and was pleased to recognize the housemaid Bessie, who alone had been kind to her when she was a little girl at Gateshead Hall.
Bless you. I knew you'd come.
Yes, Bessie, and I trust I am not too late. How is Mrs. Reed? Alive still, I hope?
Yes, she's alive, and more sensible and collected than she was. The doctor says she may linger a week or two longer.
Has she mentioned me lately?
Oh, she was talking of you only this morning and wishing you'd come.
I know she has a particular wish to see me, and I would not defer attending to her desire longer than is absolutely necessary.
Who is that?
It is Jane Eyre, Aunt.
Who calls me Aunt? Is there a nurse here? Or is there no one in the room but you?
No, Aunt.
Jane approached the bed. She looked into a certain corner, half expecting to see the slim outline of a once-dreaded cane, which used to leap out imp-like to lace her quivering palm or shrinking neck. Well did she remember Mrs. Reed's face. She had left her in bitterness and hate, but now she viewed her with no other emotion than sorrow for her great sufferings, and a strong yearning to forget and forgive all injuries.
Read this letter.
Madam, will you have the goodness to send me the address of my niece, Jane Eyre, and tell me how she is? It is my intention for her to come to me in Madeira, Providence has blessed my endeavours to secure a competency, and as I am unmarried and childless, I wish to adopt her during my life and make her my heir. I am, Madam, etc., etc., John Eyre, Madeira. This letter is dated 3 years since.
Oh, bring me some water. Oh, make haste. Oh. My last hour is racked by the recollection of a deed which, but for you, I should never have been tempted to commit.
If you could be persuaded to think no more of it, Aunt, and to regard me with kindness and forgiveness.
You have a very bad disposition, and one to this day which I feel is impossible to understand. How for 9 years you could be patient and quiescent under any
My disposition is not so bad as you think. I am passionate, but not vindictive. Many a time as a child I should have been glad to love you if you had let me, and I long earnestly to be reconciled to you now.
You are oppressing me, leaning over the bed. Oh, get me some water.
Love me or hate me as you will. You have my full and free forgiveness. Ask now for God's, and be at peace.
A month elapsed before Jane quitted Gateshead. Her journey was tedious. She was tormented by visions of Miss Ingram closing the doors of Thornfield Hall against her, while Mr. Rochester looked on with his arms folded, smiling sardonically at both of them. Jane had not informed Mrs. Fairfax of the exact day of her return, for she did not wish to be met at Millcote. When she alighted, it was almost evening. How glad she felt as the road shortened before her. Her joy was in the anticipation of looking again on Mr. Rochester, whether he looked at her or not. And then she saw him, sitting on a stile, with a book and pencil in his hand, writing.
There you are. Come on, if you please. And this is Jane Eyre. You come from Millcote, and on foot? Oh, yes, just one of your tricks to steal into the vicinage of your home alone at twilight, just as if you were a dream or a shade. What the deuce have you done with yourself this last month?
I have been with my aunt.
Truant, truant. Absent from me a month, and quite forgetting me I'll be sworn. Did you know I'd been to London?
Mrs. Fairfax told me in a letter.
And, did she inform you what I went to do?
Oh, yes, sir. Everybody knew your errand.
You must see the carriage, Jane, and tell me if you don't think it'll suit Mrs. Rochester exactly, and whether she won't look like Queen Boadicea leaning back against those purple cushions. I wish, Jane, that I were a trifle better adapted to match with her externally. Tell me now, fairy as you are, can't you give me a charm or a filter to make me a handsome man?
It would be past the power of magic, sir.
Pass, Jane, go on home, and stay your weary little feet at a friend's threshold.
Thank you, Mr. Rochester, for your great kindness. So nothing's been decided yet, Mrs. Fairfax?
You've been home a fortnight. Mr. Rochester has said nothing. I actually put the question to him as to when he was bringing his bride home, but he answered me with a joke and one of his queer looks. I have never been able to tell what to make of him. Where is Adele this evening?
So weary after gathering strawberries in Hay Lane that Sophie has put her to bed with the sun. What a lovely midsummer eve. What an incense of sweet briar, southern wood, jasmine and pinks. And the roses. Mrs. Fairfax?
On so lovely a night it is a shame to sit in the house, and surely no one can wish to go to bed while sunset is thus rising with moonrise. Thornfield is a pleasant place in summer, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Pity. It is always the way of events in this life. No sooner have you got settled in a pleasant resting place than a voice calls out to you to rise and move on, for the hour of repose is expired.
Must I move on, sir? Must I leave Thornfield?
I believe you must, Jane. I am sorry, Jane, but I believe indeed you must.
Well, sir, I shall be ready when the order to march comes.
It has come now. I must give it tonight.
Then you are going to be married, sir?
Exactly. Precisely. With your usual acuteness, you have hit the nail on the head.
Soon, sir?
Very soon, Miss Eyre. And you'll remember, Jane, the first time I, or rumour, plainly intimated to you that it was my intention to put my old bachelor's neck into the sacred noose, to enter into the holy estate of matrimony, to take Miss Ingram to my bosom. In short, she's an extensive armful, but that's not to the point. One can't have too much of an excellent thing as my beautiful Blanche. I wish to remind you that it was you who first said to me, with that discretion I respect in you, with that foresight, prudence, and humility which befit your responsible and dependent position, that in case I married Miss Ingram, both you and little Adele had better trot forthwith. I pass over the sort of slur conveyed in this suggestion on the character of my beloved. Indeed, when you are far away, Jane, I'll try to forget it. I shall notice only its wisdom, which is such that I have made it my law of action. Adele must go to school, and you, Miss Eyre, must get a new situation.
Yes, sir. I will advertise immediately. And meantime...
in about a month I hope to be a bridegroom, and in the interim I shall myself look out for employment and asylum for you.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry to give...
No need to apologize. I consider that when a dependent does her duty as well as you have done yours, she has a sort of claim on her employer for any little assistance he can conveniently render her. Indeed, I have already given thought to a widowed lady with 5 daughters in Ireland. You'll like Ireland, I think. They're such warm-hearted people there, they say.
It is a long way off, sir.
From what, Jane?
From England. And from Thornfield, and...
Well?
From you, sir. It is a long way.
It is, to be sure. And when you get to Ireland, I shall never see you again, Jane. That's certain. I never go over to Ireland, not having myself much of a fancy for the country. We have been good friends, Jane, have we not?
Yes, sir.
And when friends are on the eve of separation, they like to spend the little time that remains to them close to each other. Come, sit here beside me on this bench. I'm sorry to send my little friend on such weary travels, but if I can't do better, how is it to be helped? Are you anything akin to me, Jane, do you think? Because I sometimes have a queer feeling with regard to you, especially when you are near me, as now. It is as if I had a string somewhere under my left ribs, tightly and inextricably knotted to a similar string situated in the corresponding quarter of your little frame. And if that boisterous channel, and 200 miles or so of land, comes broad between us, I'm afraid that cord of communication will be snapped. And then I have a nervous notion I should take to bleeding inwardly. As for you, you'd forget me.
That I never should, sir. You know.
Jane, listen.
I wish I had never been born, or never come to Thornfield.
Because you are sorry to leave it?
I grieve to leave Thornfield. I love it, because I have lived in it a full and delightful life. Momentarily, at least. I have not been trampled on. I have not been petrified. I have not been buried with inferior minds, and excluded from every glimpse of communion with what is bright and energetic and high. I have talked face to face with what I reverence, with what I delight in, with an original, a vigorous and expanded mind. I have known you, Mr. Rochester, and it strikes me with terror and anguish to feel I absolutely must be torn from you forever. I see the necessity of departure, and it is like looking on the necessity of death.
Where do you see the necessity?
Where? You, sir, have placed it before me.
In what shape?
In the shape of Miss Ingram, a noble and beautiful woman, your bride. I tell you I must go. You think I can stay to become nothing to you? Do you think I am an automaton, a machine without feelings, and can bear to have my morsel of bread snatched from my lips and my drop of living water dashed from my cup? Do you think because I am poor, obscure, plain and little, I am soulless and heartless? You think wrong. I have as much soul as you and full as much heart. And if God had gifted me with some beauty and as much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me as it is now for me to leave you. I'm not talking to you now through the medium of custom, conventionalities, nor even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave and we stood at God's feet as we are.
As we are. So, Jane.
Yes, so, sir, and yet not so. For you are a married man, or as good as a married man, and wed to one inferior to you, with whom you have no sympathy, whom I do not believe you truly love. For I have seen and heard you sneer at her. I would scorn such a union. Therefore I am better than you. Let me go.
Where, Jane? Where? To Ireland?
Yes, to Ireland. I have spoken my mind and can go anywhere now.
Don't struggle so like a wild, frantic bird that is rending its own.
I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being, with an independent will, which I now exert to leave you.
Your will shall decide your destiny. I offer you my hand, my heart, and a share of all my possessions.
You play a farce, which I merely laugh at.
I ask you to pass through life at my side, to be my second self, and best earthly companion.
For that fate you have already made your choice. You must abide by it.
Jane, be still. For a few moments you are overexcited. I will be still, too. Come. Let us explain and understand one another.
I will never again come to your side. I am torn away now, and cannot return.
Jane, I summon you as my wife. It is you only I intend to marry. Jane, come hither. My bride is here, because my equal is here, and my likeness. Jane, will you marry me? Do you doubt me, Jane?
Entirely.
Have you no faith in me?
Not a whit.
What love have I for Miss Ingram? None. And that you know. What love has she for me? None, as I have taken pains to prove. I caused a rumour that my fortune was not as she and her mother had presumed, and then what coldness from them both. I would not and could not marry Miss Ingram. You almost unearthly thing, I love as my own flesh. I must have you as my own, entirely my own. Will you be mine? Oh, say yes quickly.
Mr. Rochester, let me look at your face. Turn to the moonlight.
Why?
Because I want to read your countenance. Turn.
There. You will find it scarcely more legible than a crumpled, scratched page. Read on, only make haste, for I suffer. Oh, Jane, you torture me with that searching and yet faithful and generous look. You torture me.
How can I do that? If you are true, and your offer real, my only feelings towards you must be gratitude and devotion. They cannot torture.
Gratitude? Jane, accept me quickly. Say, Edward, give me my name. Edward, I will marry you.
Are you in earnest? Do you truly love me? Do you absolutely want me to be your wife?
I do.
Then, sir, I will marry you.
My little wife.
Dear Edward.
What a terrible storm. Adele has just told me that the great horse-chestnut tree at the bottom of the garden has been struck by lightning, with half of it split away. Tell me whether it is actually true that Mr. Rochester has asked you to marry him. Don't laugh at me, but I really thought he came in here and said that in a month you would be his wife.
He said the same thing to me, and I accepted him.
I could never have thought it. He is a proud man. All the Rochesters were proud, and his father at least liked mine. He too has always been called careful. He means to marry you?
He tells me so.
There are 20 years difference in your age. He might almost be your father.
No, indeed, Mrs. Fairfax. He is nothing like my father. No one who saw us together would suppose it for an instant. Mr. Rochester looks as young, and is as young, as some men at 25.
Is it really for love that he is going to marry you? Why, I'm sorry to grieve you, but you are so young and so little acquainted with men, and in this case I do fear there will be something found to be different to what either you or I expect. Try to keep Mr. Rochester at a distance. Distrust yourself as well as him. Gentlemen in his station are not accustomed to marry their governesses.
When Jane rose and dressed the next morning, she thought over what had happened and wondered if it were a dream. As she looked at her face in the glass, she felt it was no longer plain. There was hope in its aspect and life in its colour. She felt sure that when she raised her face to her master, it would not cool his affection. She was not surprised as she ran down into the hall to see that a brilliant June morning had succeeded to the tempest of the night. Nature must be gladsome that she was so happy. Little Adele told her Mr. Rochester had cancelled their lessons that morning, and was waiting for Jane in the library.
Come in and bid me good morning, Jane Eyre, soon to be Jane Rochester. You blush, Jane. What is that for?
Because you gave me a new name, Jane Rochester, and it seems so strange.
This morning I have written to my banker in London to send me certain jewels he has in his keeping, heirlooms. In a day or two, I shall pour them into your lap.
Oh, sir, never mind jewels. I am your plain Quakerish governess.
You are a beauty in my eyes, delicate and aerial.
Puny and insignificant, you mean?
I will attire my Jane in satin and lace, and she shall have roses in her hair.
And then you won't know me, sir.
I shall take you this very day to Millcote, and you must choose some dresses for yourself. The wedding is to take place quietly in the church down below yonder. And then I shall take you to town, and then we shall travel all over Europe. I shall be able to revisit it healed and cleansed with a very angel as my comforter.
I am not an angel, and I will not be one until I die. I will be myself. Do not expect anything celestial of me. As for you, I anticipate that for a while you will perhaps be as you are now, and then you will turn cool, and then you will be capricious, and then you will be stern, and I shall have much ado to please you. But when you get well used to me, you will perhaps like me again. Like me, I say, and not love me.
Jane, not only like, but love you, with truth, fervour, constancy. I have never met your likeness, Jane. You please me. You seem to submit, and yet you master me. And I like the sense of pliancy you impart. Ask me for something now, Jane. I desire to be entreated, the least thing.
Then do not send for jewels, and do not crown me with roses. Answer me one thing. Why did you take such pains to make me believe you wished to marry Miss Ingram?
Because I wished to render you as madly in love with me as I was with you. Jealousy would be my best ally. Were you jealous, Jane?
Never mind that. Did you think nothing of her feelings? Won't she feel forsaken and deserted?
Her feelings are concentrated in one, pride. She deserted me when she suspected my insolvency.
You have a curious, designing mind, Mr. Rochester. Mrs. Fairfax thinks I have forgotten your station and mine. It pains me to be so misjudged by so good a woman.
Go and put on your bonnet. I will enlighten the old lady's understanding before we go out for our drive.
Sophie took me in to look at my wedding dress, which they had just brought, and under it in the box I found your present, the veil which is so exquisitely wrought.
Yes.
The gale was rising, and for some time after I went to bed I could not sleep. On sleeping, I continued in dreams the idea of a dark and gusty night. I seemed to hear a mournful undersound, perhaps a dog, howling at a distance. You were walking on a road a long way in front of me. I was burdened with the charge of a little child, which shivered in my cold arms and wailed piteously in my ear. I tried to overtake you, but my movements were fettered, and you drew further and further away.
And these dreams weigh on your spirit now? Forget them and think only of true happiness and our love.
But there is more. I awakened. A candle was on the dressing table, and the door of my closet stood open. A figure was surveying my wedding dress, which was hanging there. I said, "Is that you, Sophie? What are you doing?" No one answered. I had risen up in bed. I bent forward. First surprise, then bewilderment came over me, and then my blood went cold in my veins. Mr. Rochester, it was not Sophie. It was not Leah. It was not Mrs. Fairfax. It was not even that strange woman, Grace Poole.
It must have been one of them.
No, sir. I solemnly assure you to the contrary. It was a woman, tall and large, with thick and dark hair hanging long down her back. I know not what dress she had on. It was white and straight, but whether gown, sheet, a shroud, I cannot tell.
Did you see her face?
Not at first, but presently she took my veil from its place. She held it up long, and then she threw it over her own head and turned to the mirror. It was a discoloured face. It was a savage face. I wish I could forget the roll of the red eyes, the purple complexion, the lips swelled and dark. It reminded me of the foul German spectre, the vampire.
What did it do?
Sir, it removed my veil from its gaunt head, rent it in 2 parts, and flinging both parts on the floor, trampled on them.
And afterwards?
It drew aside the window curtain and looked out. Perhaps it saw the dawn approaching, for taking the candle, it retreated to the door. Just at my bedside, the figure stopped. The fiery eye glared upon me. She thrust up the candle close to my face and extinguished it under my eyes. I was aware of her lurid visage flamed over mine, and I lost consciousness for the second time in my life, rendered insensible from terror.
Who was with you when you revived?
No one, sir, but the broad day. I was determined that I would impart this vision only to you.
It was the creature of an overstimulated brain. Oh, that is certain. I must be careful of you, my treasure.
No. No, my nerves were not at fault. The thing was real.
And your previous dreams? Were they real too?
I considered that. But when I looked about the room in full daylight, there, on the carpet, I saw the veil, torn from top to bottom in 2 halves.
Well, thank God that if anything malignant did come near you last night, it was only the veil that was harmed. Oh, to think of what might have happened. Yet I'll explain it to you, Jane. It was half dream, half reality. A woman did, I doubt not, enter your room. And that woman must have been, Grace Poole. You call her a strange being yourself. From all you know, you have reason to call her so. What did she do to me? What to Mr. Mason? In a state between sleeping and dreaming, you ascribed to her an appearance of a goblin, the result of your nightmare. She did rend the veil. I see you would ask why I keep such a woman in my house. When we have been married...
Treatment, and in the 10th break out all fire and violence. Oh, I can never comprehend.
Certainly she felt relieved, so answered him with a contented smile. That night she didn't sleep at all. She went into Adele and cradled her in her arms. She seemed the emblem of her past life. As Jane hurried from her room, wearing the veil after all, she saw a robed figure so unlike her usual self that it seemed almost the image of a stranger.
Jane, you are as fair as a lily, not only the pride of my life, but the desire of my eyes.
Is the carriage ready?
Yes, sir.
Is the luggage brought down?
They are bringing it down, sir.
We shall not want it to go to church, but it must be ready the moment we return.
Yes, sir.
I require and charge you both, as he will answer in the dreadful day of judgment, when the secrets of all hearts shall be disclosed, that if either of you know any impediment why ye may not lawfully be joined together in matrimony,
I declare the existence of an impediment. The ceremony is quite broken off. I am in a position to prove my allegation. An insuperable impediment to this marriage exists. Mr. Rochester has a wife, now living.
Jane's nerves vibrated to those words, as they had never vibrated to thunder. She looked at Mr. Rochester. She made him look at her. His whole face was colourless rock. His eyes were both spark and flint. He seemed as if he would defy all things. Without speaking, without smiling, without seeming to recognize in Jane a human being, he twined her waist with his arm and riveted her to his side.
Who are you?
My name is Biggs. I'm a solicitor.
And you would thrust on me a wife?
I would remind you of your lady's existence, sir, which the law recognizes if you do not. I affirm and can prove that on the 20th of October, Edward Fairfax Rochester of Thornfield Hall was married to my sister Bertha Antoinetta Mason in Spanish Town, Jamaica. The record of the marriage will be found in the register of that church. A copy of it is now in my possession. Signed, Richard Mason.
That, if a genuine document, may prove I have been married, but it does not prove that the woman mentioned therein as my wife is still living.
She was living 3 months ago.
How do you know?
Mr. Mason, have the goodness to step forward.
Mr. Rochester, on hearing the names, set his teeth. Near to him as she was, Jane felt the spasmodic movement of fury or despair which ran through his frame. A pale face looked over the solicitor's shoulder. It was Mr. Mason. Mr. Rochester turned and glared at him. Contempt fell cool on Mr. Rochester. His passion died, as if a blight had shriveled it up.
What have you to say? The devil is in it if you cannot answer distinctly. I again demand, what have you to say?
She is now living at Thornfield Hall. I saw her there last April. I am her brother.
At Thornfield Hall? Impossible. I'm an old resident in this neighbourhood, sir, and I never heard of a Mrs. Rochester at Thornfield Hall.
No, by God. I took care that none should hear of it, or of her under that name. Enough. Wood, close your book, and take off your surplice. There will be no wedding today. Bigamy is an ugly word. I meant, however, to be a bigamist. But fate or providence has checked me. Perhaps the last. I'm little better than a devil at this moment, and deserve no doubt the sternest judgments of God. Gentlemen, my plan is broken up. What this lawyer and his client say is true. You say you have never heard of a Mrs. Rochester at Thornfield Hall, but I dare say that you have heard gossip about the mysterious lunatic kept there under lock and key. Some have whispered to you, Wood, that she is my half-sister, some my cast-off mistress. I now inform you that she is my wife, whom I married 15 years ago. Bertha Mason by name, sister of this resolute person who cowers there. Cheer up, Dick. I'd almost as soon strike a woman as you. Bertha Mason is mad, and she came of a mad family, idiots and maniacs through 3 generations. Her mother, a Creole, was both a mad woman and a drunkard, as I found out when I married the daughter, for they were silent on family secrets before. Bertha, like a dutiful child, copied her parents on both points. I had a charming partner, pure, wise, modest. You can fancy I was a happy man. I went through rich scenes. Oh, my experience has been heavenly, if only you knew it. But I offer you no further explanation. Briggs, Wood, Mason, I invite you all to come up to the house and visit Mrs. Poole's patient and my wife. You shall see what sort of being I was cheated into espousing, and judge whether or not I had a right to break the compact and seek sympathy elsewhere. This girl knew no more than you would of the disgusting secret. She thought all was fair and legal, and never dreamt she was going to be entrapped into a feigned union with a defrauded wretch already bound to a bad, mad, and imbruted partner. Come, all of you, follow me. Take the carriage back to the coach-house, John. It will not be wanted today. You know this place, Mason. She bit and stabbed you here.
In the deep shade, at the further end of the room, a figure ran backward and forward. It grovelled on all fours. It growled like some wild animal. It was covered in clothing, and a quantity of dark grizzled hair hid its face. As Grace Poole shouted a warning, Mr. Rochester flung Jane behind him. The lunatic sprang and grappled his throat viciously and laid her teeth to his cheek. They struggled. He would not strike, he would only wrestle. At last he mastered her arms. Grace Poole gave him a cord and bound the woman to a chair.
That is my wife. Such is the sole conjugal embrace I'm ever to know. Such are the endearments which are to solace my leisure hours, and this is what I would wish to have. This young girl who stands so grave and quiet at the mouth of hell, looking collectedly at the gambols of a demon. Now, judge me, priest of the gospel and man of the law, and remember, with what judgment he judge, he shall be judged. Off with you now. I must shut up my prize.
Jane must take off her wedding dress. It is strange that I feel so calm. I cannot weep. Nothing has maimed or smitten me. And yet where is the Jane Eyre of yesterday? Where is her life? Where are her prospects? As for my love, it is shivering in my arms like a suffering child in a cold cradle. I cannot ascribe vice to Mr. Rochester. He has not betrayed me. But he is not as I thought him. The attribute of stainless truth is gone from his idea, and from his presence I must go. When? How? Whither? No doubt he will hurry me from Thornfield Hall. It seems he has no real affection for me. My view must be hateful to him. I long to be dead, and yet I am mindful of God, a remembrance of him. What am I to do? I must leave Thornfield at once. A year has passed. My home is now a cottage. I labour as a village schoolteacher in Morton, as actively and as faithfully as I can. I feel that I have become a favourite in the neighbourhood. To live amidst general regard is like sitting in sunshine, calm and sweet. Yet at night I rush into strange dreams where I again and again meet Mr. Rochester. There is the sense of being in his arms, hearing his voice, touching his hand and cheek, loving him, being loved by him. I awake, trembling and quivering, but at 9 the next day I punctually open the school, tranquil, settled, prepared for the steady duties of the day. I have received a letter from Mr. Briggs, telling me that my uncle is dead. He has left me a considerable fortune, and independence is a grand boon. I wrote to Mrs. Fairfax over 6 months ago, but there is still no news. Why is my heart beating so fast and thick? I can hear it throbbing. Oh God, what is it? I am coming. Wait for me.
Jane's first view of Thornfield Hall was of a blackened ruin. There was a silence of death about it. No wonder that letters addressed to the people there had never received an answer. Jane returned to the inn, where she found her host tending to some flowers in the garden. She had some questions to ask him, but when he complied, she scarcely knew how to begin. Such horror she had of the possible answers.
I was the late Mr. Rochester's butler. I mean the present gentleman, Mr. Edward's father. Thornfield Hall was burnt down last autumn, just about harvest time. The fire broke out at dead of night, and before the engines arrived at Millcott, the building was one massive flame. It was a dreadful spectacle. I witnessed it myself.
Did they know how the fire originated?
They guessed, ma'am. They guessed. Indeed, I should say it was ascertained beyond a doubt. There was a lady, a lunatic, in the house. She was kept in very close confinement. Some people believe that she was Mr. Rochester's mistress. But a queer thing happened a year since. A very queer thing.
This lady?
This lady turned out to be Mr. Rochester's wife. There was a young lady, a governess at the hall, that Mr. Rochester fell in...
But the fire!
I'm coming to that, ma'am. That Mr. Edward fell in love with.
You can tell me this part of the story another time, but now I've a particular wish to hear about the fire. Did this lunatic, Mrs. Rochester, have a hand in it?
You've hit it, ma'am. It's quite certain that it was her. After the governess had run away 2 months before, Mr. Rochester sent Mrs. Fairfax, the housekeeper, away with an annuity, a handsome one, and she deserved it. Miss Adele, a ward he had, was sent away to school. He grew savage when he could not track down the governess. He broke off all acquaintance and shut himself up like a hermit. Mrs. Poole took care of the lunatic, but while she was sleeping, the lunatic cunningly stole her keys and made her way to where the governess used to sleep, and set the bed on fire. Mr. Rochester got the servants out of their beds, and then he went back to get his mad wife out of her cell. They called out to him that she was on the roof. She was standing and waving her arms above the battlements. You could hear her shouting a mile off. We heard him shout, "Bertha!" We saw him approach her, and then, ma'am, she yelled and gave a spring, and the next minute she lay smashed on the pavement.
Dead?
Dead? Aye, dead as the stones on which her brains and blood were scattered.
Good God.
You may well say so, ma'am. It was frightful.
Were there any other lives lost?
No. Perhaps it would have been better if there had been. Poor Mr. Edward. Some say it was a judgment on him, but I pity him.
You said he was alive.
Yes, he is alive. But many think he had better be dead.
Why? How? Where is he? Is he in England?
Aye. He can't get out of England. He's a fixture now. He's stone blind.
But what caused this calamity?
It was all his own courage, and in a way, his kindness. He wouldn't leave the house till everyone else was out before him. As he came down the great staircase at last, after Mrs. Rochester had flung herself from the battlements, there was a great crash. All fell. He was taken out of the ruins alive, but sadly hurt. One eye was knocked out, and one hand so crushed that Mr. Carter, the surgeon, had to amputate it directly. The other eye inflamed. He lost the sight of that also. He is now helpless, indeed, blind and a cripple.
Where is he? Where does he now live?
About 30 miles off, in a desolate spot.
Who is with him?
Old John and his wife. He would have none else. He is quite broken down, they say.
Have you any sort of conveyance?
Yes, ma'am. We have a chaise which is ready for hire.
I need it immediately.
Jane arrived at Ferndean on foot, having dismissed the chaise and driver with double their usual remuneration. From the narrow front door, a figure came out into the twilight and stood on the step, a man without a hat. He stretched out his hand as if to feel whether it rained. Dusk as it was, she recognized him. It was her master. His form was still erect, his hair was still raven black, but in his countenance Jane saw a change that looked desperate and brooding. But she had no fear of him in his blind ferocity. A soft hope blent with her sorrow that soon she should dare to drop a kiss on that brow of rock, and on those lips so sternly sealed beneath it. But not yet. She waited till John took his master inside. She now drew near and knocked. John's wife Mary opened the door. She started as if she had seen a ghost.
Mary, how are you?
Oh, miss, is it really you and not a ghost?
I was at Thornfield today and heard all that happened there. I've come to see Mr. Rochester. Mary, is it possible for you to accommodate me at the house for the night? For I should like to stay.
Oh, I'll turn down the bed at once, ma'am.
Is that what he rang for?
He always has some water and some candles brought in at dusk, though he is blind.
Give the tray to me. I will carry it in.
This is you, Mary, is it not?
Mary is in the kitchen.
Who is this? Who is this? Speak again.
Will you have a little more water, sir? I spilled half of what was in the glass.
Who is it? What is it? Who speaks?
Pilot knows me, and John and Mary know I am here. I came only this evening.
Great God, what delusion has come over me? Oh, what sweet madness has seized me.
No delusion, no madness. Your mind, sir, is too strong for delusion, your health too sound for frenzy.
And where is this speaker? Is it only a voice? I cannot see, but I must feel, or my heart will stop and my brain burst. Whatever, whoever you are, be perceptible to the touch, or I cannot live. Her very fingers, her small, slight fingers. If so, there must be more of her. Is it Jane? What is it? This is her shape. This is her size.
And this her voice. She
She is all here. Her heart, too. God bless you, sir. I'm glad to be so near you again.
Jane Eyre.
My dear master, I am Jane Eyre. I have found you out. I am come back to you.
In truth, in the flesh. My living Jane.
You touch me, sir. You hold me, and fast enough. I am not cold like a corpse, nor vacant like air, am I?
My living darling. These are certainly her limbs, and these her features. But I cannot be so blessed after all my misery. It is a dream. Such dreams as I have had at night when I have clasped her once more to my heart, as I do now, and kissed her, as thus, and felt that she loved me, and trusted that she would not leave me.
Which I never will, sir, from this day.
Never will, says the vision. But I always awoke and found it an empty mockery, and I was desolate and abandoned, my life dark, lonely, hopeless, my soul athirst and forbidden to drink, my heart famished and never to be fed. Gentle, soft dream nestling in my arms now. You will fly too, as your sisters have all fled before you. But kiss me before you go. Embrace me, Jane.
There, sir. And there.
Is it you? Is it Jane? You are come back to me then?
I am.
And you do not lie dead in some ditch under some stream, and you are not a pining outcast amongst strangers.
No, sir. I'm an independent woman now.
Independent? Oh, what do you mean? What do you mean, Jane?
My uncle in Madeira is dead, and left me £5,000.
Well, this is practical. This is real. I should never dream that. Besides, there is that peculiar voice of hers, so animating and piquant as well as soft. It cheers my withered heart. It puts life into it. What, Janet? Are you an independent woman? A rich woman?
Quite rich, sir. If you won't let me live with you, I can build a house of my own close up to your door, and you may come and sit in my parlour when you want company of an evening.
Oh, but as you are rich, Jane, you have now, no doubt, friends who will look after you and not suffer you to devote yourself to a blind lamenter like me.
I told you I am an independent, sir. As well as rich, I am my own mistress.
And you will stay with me?
Certainly, unless you object. I will be your neighbour, your nurse, your housekeeper. I find you lonely. I will be your companion, to read to you, to walk with you, to sit with you, to wait on you, to be eyes and hands to you. Cease to look so melancholy, my dear master. You shall not be left desolate, so long as I live.
Oh, Jane, you must not go. I have touched you, heard you, felt the comfort of your presence, the sweetness of your consolation. I cannot give up these joys. I have little left in myself. I must have you. The world may laugh, may call me absurd, selfish, but it does not signify. My very soul demands you. It will be satisfied, or I will take deadly vengeance on its frame.
Well, sir, I will stay with you. I have said so.
Yes, but you understand one thing by staying with me, and I understand another. You perhaps could make up your mind to be about my hand and chair, to wait on me as a kind little nurse, for you have an affectionate heart and a generous spirit, which prompt you to make sacrifices for those you pity, and that ought to suffice for me, no doubt. I suppose I should now entertain none but fatherly feelings for you. Do you think so? Come, tell me.
I will think what you like, sir. I'm content to be only your nurse if you think it better.
But you cannot always be my nurse, Janet. A year and a day. I will tell you.
Jane was not satisfied, but to please Mr. Rochester she endeavoured to appear so.
You are young. You must marry one day.
I don't care about being married.
You should care, Janet. If I were what I once was, I should try to make you care. But a sightless block.
It is time someone undertook to rehumanize you, for I see you are being metamorphosed into a lion or something of that sort. Your hair reminds me of eagle's feathers. Whether your nails are grown like bird's claws or not, I have not yet noticed.
On this arm, I have neither hand nor nails. It is a mere stump. A ghastly sight, don't you think so, Jane?
It is a pity to see it, and a pity to see your eyes, and the scar of fire on your forehead. And the worst of it is, one is in danger of loving you too well for all this, and making too much of you.
I thought you would be revolted, Jane, when you saw my arm and my cicatrized visage.
Did you? Don't tell me so, lest I should say something disparaging to your judgment. Now, let me leave you an instant, to make a better fire and have the hearth swept up. Can you tell when there is a good fire?
Yes, with the right eye, I see a glow, a ruddy haze.
And you see the candles?
Very dimly. Each is a luminous cloud.
Can you see me?
No, my fairy. But I'm only too thankful to hear and feel you.
When do you take supper?
I never take supper.
But you shall have some tonight. I am hungry. So are you, I dare say. Only you forget.
Summoning Mary, Jane soon had the room in more cheerful order. She prepared him likewise a comfortable repast. Her spirits were excited. There was no restraint, for with him she was at perfect ease, because she knew she suited him. It brought to life and light her whole nature. In his presence she thoroughly lived, and he lived in hers. Blind as he was, smiles played over his face. Joy dawned on his forehead. His lineaments softened and warmed.
Have you a pocket comb about you, sir?
What for, Jane?
Just to comb out this shaggy black mane. I find you rather alarming. When I examine you close at hand, you talk of my being a fairy, but I am sure you are more like a brownie.
Oh, am I hideous, Jane?
Very, sir. You always were.
The wickedness has not been taken out of you wherever you have sojourned.
Yet I have been with good people, far better than you, 100 times better. People possessed of ideas and views you never entertained in your life. Quite more refined and exalted.
Who the deuce have you been with?
If you twist in that way, you will make me pull the hair out of your head.
Who have you been with, Jane?
You shall not get it out of me tonight, sir. You must wait till tomorrow. To leave my tale half told will, you know, be a sort of security that I shall appear at your breakfast table to finish it. By the by, I must mind not to rise on your hearth with only a glass of water then. I must bring an egg at the least, to say nothing of fried ham.
Ah, you mocking changeling, fairy born and human bred! Oh, you make me feel as I have not felt these 12 months. If Saul could have had you for his David, the evil spirit would have been exorcised without the aid of the harp.
There, sir. You are read up and made decent. Now I'll leave you.
Oh.
I have been travelling these last 3 days, and I believe I am tired. Good night.
Just one word, Jane. Were there only ladies in the house where you have been?
Jane laughed and made her escape, still laughing as she ran upstairs. She had the means of fretting him out of his melancholy for some time to come. Very early the next morning, She heard him up and astir. She came down as soon as she thought there was a prospect of breakfast. Entering the room very softly, she saw him sitting in his chair, still but not at rest, the lines of habitual sadness marking his strong features. After their meal, she led him out into the fields, describing how brilliantly green they were. He broke out suddenly while clasping her in his arms.
Oh, cruel, cruel deserter. Oh, Jane, how did I feel when I discovered that you had left Thornfield and when I could nowhere find you? What could my darling do, I asked, left destitute and penniless? Oh. And what did she do? Let me hear. Now.
I obtained the office of schoolmistress through my cousin, St. John Rivers. He and his sister were very kind to me.
St. John made you schoolmistress of Morton before he knew you were his cousin?
Yes.
You would often see him? He would visit the school sometimes?
Daily.
He would approve of your plans, Jane? I know they would be clever for you. You're a talented creature.
He approved of them, yes.
He would discover many things in you he could not have expected to find. Some of your accomplishments are not ordinary.
I don't know about that.
Well, you had a little cottage near the school, you say. Did he ever come there to see you?
Now and then.
Of an evening?
Once or twice.
How long did you reside with him and his sisters after the cousinship was discovered?
5 months.
Did Rivers spend much time with the ladies of his family?
Yes. The back parlour was both his study and ours. He sat near the window and we by the table.
Did he study much?
A good deal.
What?
Hindustani.
And what did you do meantime?
I learnt German first.
Did he teach you?
He did not understand German.
Did he teach you nothing?
A little Hindustani.
Rivers taught you Hindustani?
Yes, sir.
And his sisters also?
No.
Only you?
Only me.
Did you ask to learn?
No.
He wished to teach you?
Yes.
Why did he wish it? Of what use could Hindustani be to you?
He intended me to go with him to India.
Ah, here I reach the root of the matter. He wanted you to marry him.
He asked me to marry him.
That is a fiction, an impudent invention to vex me.
I beg your pardon. It is the literal truth. He asked me more than once, and was as stiff about urging his point as ever you could be.
Miss Eyre, I repeat it, you can leave me. How often am I to say the same thing? Why do you remain pertinaciously perched on my knee when I have given you notice to quit?
Because I am comfortable there.
No, Jane. You are not comfortable there, because your heart is not with me. It is with this cousin, this St. John. Oh, till this moment I thought my little Jane was all mine. I had a belief. She loved me, even when she left me. That was an atom of sweet in much bitter. Long as we have been parted, hot tears as I have wept over our separation, I never thought that while I was mourning her she was loving another. But it is useless grieving. Jane, leave me, go and marry Rivers.
Shake me off then, sir. Push me away, for I'll not leave you of my own accord.
Oh, Jane, I ever like your tone of voice. It still renews hope. It sounds so truthful. When I hear it, it carries me back a year. I forget that you have formed a new tie. But I'm not a fool. Go.
Where must I go, sir?
Your own way, with the husband you have chosen.
Who is that?
Oh, you know, this St. John Rivers.
He is not my husband, nor ever will be. He does not love me. I do not love him. He loves as he can love, and that is not as you love. A beautiful young lady called Rosamond. He wanted to marry me only because he thought I should make a suitable missionary's wife, which she would not have done. He is good and great, but severe, and for me, cold as an iceberg. He is not like you, sir. I am not happy at his side, nor near him, nor with him. He has no indulgence for me, no fondness. He sees nothing attractive in me, not even youth, only a few useful mental points. Then must I leave you, sir, to go to him?
What, Jane, is this true? Is such really the state of matters between you and Rivers?
Absolutely, sir. Oh, you need not be jealous. I wanted to tease you a little, to make you less sad. I thought anger would be better than grief. But if you wish me to love you, could you but see how much I do love you? You would be proud and content. All my heart is yours, sir. It belongs to you, and with you it would remain, were fate to exile the rest of me from your presence forever.
My seared vision, my crippled strength. I am no better than the old lightning-struck chestnut tree in Thornfield Orchard. On what right would that ruin have to bid a budding woodbine cover its decay with freshness?
You are no ruin, sir, no lightning-struck tree. You are a green and vigorous. Plants will grow about your roots, whether you ask them or not, because you take delight in your bountiful shadow, and as they grow they will lean towards you and wind round you, because your strength offers them so safe a prop.
You speak of friends, Jane?
Yes, of friends.
Ah, Jane. But I want a wife.
Do you, sir?
Yes. Is it news to you?
Of course. You said nothing about it before.
Is it unwelcome news?
That depends on circumstances, sir. On your choice.
Which you shall make for me, Jane. I will abide by your decision.
Choose then, sir. Her who loves you best?
I will at least choose her I love best. Jane, will you marry me?
Yes, sir.
A poor blind man whom you will have to lead about by the hand.
Yes, sir.
A crippled man 20 years older than you whom you will have to wait on.
Yes, sir.
Truly, Jane?
Most truly, sir.
Oh, my darling. God bless and reward you.
Mr. Rochester, if ever I did a good deed in my life, if ever I thought a good thought, if ever I prayed a sincere and a blameless prayer, if ever I wished a righteous wish, I am rewarded now. To be your wife is for me to be happy as I can be on earth.
Because you delight in sacrifice.
Sacrifice? What do I sacrifice? Famine for food, expectation for content. To be privileged, to put my arms round what I value, to press my lips to what I love, to repose on what I trust. Is that to make a sacrifice? If so, then certainly I delight in sacrifice.
And to bear with my infirmities, Jane, to overlook my deficiencies.
Which are none, sir, to me. I love you better now when I can really be useful to you than I did in your state of proud independence, when you disdained every part but that of the giver and protector.
Hitherto, I have hated to be helped, to be led. Henceforth I feel I shall hate it no more. I did not like to put my hand into a hireling's, but it is pleasant to feel it circled by Jane's little fingers. I preferred utter loneliness to the constant attendance of servants. But Jane's soft ministry will be a perpetual joy. Jane suits me. Do I suit her?
To the finest fibre of my nature, sir.
The case being so, we have nothing in the world to wait for. We must be married instantly. We must become one flesh without any delay, Jane. There is but the license to get, then we marry.
Mr. Rochester, I have just discovered the sun is far declined from its meridian, and Pilot is actually gone home to his dinner. Let me look at your watch.
Fasten it into your girdle, Janet, and keep it henceforward. I have no use for it.
It is nearly 4 o'clock in the afternoon, sir. Don't you feel hungry?
The 3rd day from this must be our wedding day, Jane. Never mind fine clothes and jewels now. All that is not worth a fillip.
The sun has dried up all the raindrops, sir. The breeze is still. It is quite hot.
Do you know, Jane, I have your little pearl necklace at this moment fastened round my bronze scrag under my cravat. I've worn it since the day I lost my only treasure, as a memento of her. Some days since, nay, I can number them 4. It was last Monday night. A singular mood came over me, one in which grief replaced frenzy, sorrow, sullenness. I had long had the impression that since I could nowhere find you, you must be dead. Late that night, perhaps between 11 and 12 o'clock, ere I retired to my dreary rest, I supplicated God that if it seemed good to him, I might soon be taken from this life and admitted to that world to come, where there was still hope of rejoining Jane. I was in my room and sitting by the window, which was open. It soothed me to feel the balmy night air, though I could see no stars, and only by a vague, luminous haze knew the presence of the moon. I longed for thee, Janet. Oh, I longed for thee both with soul and flesh. I asked of God at once in anguish and humility, if I had not been long enough desolate, afflicted, tormented, and might not soon taste bliss and peace once more. That I merited all I endured, I acknowledged. That I could scarcely endure more, I pleaded. And the alpha and omega of my heart's wishes broke involuntarily from my lips in the words, Jane, Jane, Jane.
Did you speak these words aloud?
I did, Jane. If any listener had heard me, he would have thought me mad. I pronounced them with such frantic energy.
And it was last Monday night, somewhere near midnight.
Well, yes, but the time is of no consequence. What followed is the strange point. You will think me superstitious. Some superstition I have in my blood and always had. Nevertheless, it is true. True, at least, it is that I heard what I now relate. As I exclaimed, Jane, 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 a voice, I cannot tell whence the voice came, but I know whose voice it was, replied, I am coming, wait for me. And after a moment went whispering on the wind the words, where are you? I'll tell you if I can. The idea, the picture these words opened to my mind, yet it is difficult to express what I want to express. Ferndean is buried, as you see, in a heavy wood, where sound falls dull and dies unreverberating. Where are you seemed spoken amongst mountains, for I heard a hill-sent echo repeat the words. Cooler and fresher at the moment the gale seemed to visit my brow, I could have deemed that in some wild, lone scene I and Jane were meeting. In spirit, I believe, we must have met. You no doubt were, at that hour, in unconscious sleep, Jane. Perhaps your soul wandered from its cell to comfort mine, for those were your accents. As certain as I live, they were yours. You cannot now wonder that when you rose upon me so unexpectedly last night, I had difficulty in believing you any other than a mere vision, a mere voice and vision. Something that would melt to silence and annihilation, as the midnight whisper and mountain echo had melted before. Now I thank God I know it to be otherwise. Yes, I thank